My name is Tautkus. I'm a Pacific Northwest-based mixed media artist, and I'm going to be showing you my process today.
I'm going to start with the dark. I always try to use my almost empty cans, stuff that's left over from large-scale work or that I have laying around. It splats. It creates these weird freckles and speckles that are generally existent in the sky. So this is going to be my medium. I'm going to leave it black up there this time. And then highlight.
With these, when I paint them, sometimes I paint them in any direction. I build from dark to light or light to dark, depending upon how I feel when I start grabbing colors from the palette. So the first thing that I do is I establish where my ground masses are going to come from. So this one, for example, the blue would probably be upper region of the sky, to whereas the pink would probably be more where the sun is starting to rise from, if that was the case. If it was going down, then I could potentially flip it this way and position a moon somewhere and do a landmass down there. In this case with the pinks, I always like pinks for sunrises. They're a little bit more magical for me sometimes than sunsets. So I would establish where my landmass goes, which usually includes finding knolls or breaks in splatter patterns. So anywhere that's kind of bland is usually where I tend to build a landmass. There are some pieces, like this one, where I would select the grain of the wood and then use that as where my landmass might go and try to avoid drips and dots and such, but it's mostly just working with the sky. Stick to create some sort of rigid landmass. I try to keep it sloppy, but you still have to make sure that your seams are tight so that the paint may not bleed through too much. So maybe something along these lines, a second piece to follow, just like that. It's a landmass. To avoid overspray, take an extra piece, cover it up, some of this stuff, whatever, cover it up. Make sure your edges are tight. I could spray with black. That takes us to this step. I established where the landmass was at, take the black. Next step, after it's set, it's usually best to let it set so that the paint will actually not bleed through the lines. Sometimes you can't do anything about that. You can fix it later. Those are happy accidents. Okay, so peel the tape. Beautiful little landmass. This, as you can imagine, is miles away. The sun is probably coming up somewhere over here. It hasn't quite hit the sky. We're at like 5 o'clock in the morning. The sun doesn't rise until 5:08. I have a nice array of markers here. Occasionally, I'll add funny little things to the sky just to generate more inconsistencies. I have a thing for squares, so I might take a pink and purple and add a bunch of little squares to the sky. They're just all background stuff, but it just builds more color, more elements. that would be the developed landmass. The next step is to then take out some black markers and generate silhouettes. So obviously with silhouetting, do whatever you want, do whatever feels best. For me, my process usually starts with finding start with a couple big ones, and then I just work my way into deets. Okay, so power lines, they're very inconsistent in reality, as much as they look so very uniform. Typically the only time that they are is when they start getting far away and everything just starts meshing into one. So when you're in the farther perspectives, or the closer, the lines are going to be darker, a little more rich and full. As you start getting back farther, they can become a lot more wispy, really more of like indicators. You want them to still be there because it's important. This guy's just gonna be broken. I enjoy urban decay. The falling apart of America is really pretty. So with that, when I do power lines and I do light poles, whatever, I always try to add a lot of extra wiring, and it looks like maybe the box is open just a tiny bit, so it has this shape, or all that. They have these like circular power generators, I guess. I'm not totally sure what they are. They're the things that pop, but they're over here on the side of the power line, so they get it too. That's a sign, maybe a box, whatever. Everything really kind of stays really scribbly and light for me, but in the idea of silhouetting, it doesn't have to be perfect. When you actually see things at night, there's always funky shadows and stuff that like messes with your head. You see it during the day and it might not even exist, it seems like. Or you realize that it's a bolt. I didn't think that bolt was that big, but in the shadow, it can totally mess with your head. This guy's broken. Knob on top. I have a funny obsession with antennas. They exist in my graffiti. I put them on the tops of my letters and they're just around. It's like a symbolism thing, I guess. My antenna basically is a little receptor thingy at the top, I guess, whatever it is. Comes down and it does a little wiggle. Links up. The other thing, antennas are one thing that heavily exists in these. These are, it's a huge series that I've done. I've done a bunch of them. I'm working on 50 of them. So one thing that I try to keep really consistent is the antenna. The other thing would be a symbolism of urban decay. Would be the ever classic shoes hanging from the power line. If you don't know, you've probably never been to my neighborhood. Dark and muted with just the dramatic sky is like, it's really enough. Sometimes, lesser is more, or you appreciate the abundance in, the little things. It's all the little speckles. It's not, the beautiful contrasting details of this and that. It's really more just, it's so simple, but it's actually like really, really not. That's probably like the coolest thing that I find about these is like I really let them like form themselves.